Welcome to Hints and Guesses. Kent here. This episode it's like I'm going to climb out on the very edge of what I've been thinking about and exploring, and what I'm finding captivating. I want to talk a bit about Nietzsche's concept of the Ubermensch. I want to talk a little bit about Bryan Johnson and his Don't Die movement. And I want to talk about an ancient Greek myth, Prometheus. I'm going to try to weave these together. And so I have a few notes here in front of me, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to go. But like Bryan Johnson himself, I think he's out on the very edge of what's possible for human beings and what's possible technologically and biologically, and he's an astronaut in that kind of space. And I don't know, just thinking a bit about him kind of pulls me out onto my own edge, and I'm a little cautious in talking about Nietzsche because I'm not a scholar, I'm not a Nietzschean expert, I've never had a course on Friedrich Nietzsche, and for a long time I knew about as much as most of us know, which is his famous line, "God is dead." And I have one book, the Nietzschean Reader, and everything else I know about Nietzsche I get from Jung. Jung comments on his work, found him captivating, kind of parts ways with him in a number of key areas or something. But some of what they were up to overlaps. Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche, and so I'm not claiming expertise, but I find something attractive here and kind of being mixed together. So maybe I want to start actually with my interest in Bryan Johnson. So Bryan Johnson is the tech giant, the tech bro, who made his money early and has dedicated himself and his body to exploring what's possible through technology, science, tracking, what's possible in the realm of longevity. What does a good life look like? And in this case, what does a long life look like? And what are the barriers? And I don't know how serious he is about not dying, but he has this movement called Don't Die, and he's inviting other people into this kind of optimization conversation, and I have to say that's attractive to me, and partly because I'm getting older. Like, I think 20-year-old Kent would have found the idea kind of absurd, but I'm about to turn 50, which I have a hard time even saying, and so I think, I don't want to die. I'm all about death and resurrection, psycho-spiritually, but I prefer to live for a while here, and so there's something attractive, and I like part of me, I should say, likes the kind of biohacking optimization world that Bryan Johnson operates in, and I've kind of maybe had my on and off relationship with it. And first of all, I'm an athlete, or I don't know if I'm a real athlete. I'm athletic. I played all kinds of sports. I played soccer in college. I like running and biking, and I took a few years off after college, and I think I was sick of being in shape, and I virtually did nothing. I played in a few soccer leagues occasionally. I used to go to the gym with my wife, and she would often say, "What the heck are you doing?" I'd just be walking around listening to podcasts, like on my iPod with a little circle wheel that went around. And back then there weren't that many podcasts. I'd be listening to like Krista Tippett or something, back when it was called Speaking of Faith. And then I got, I kind of got serious again about about sports and athletics, and decided kind of out of the blue I was going to become a triathlete, which is sort of funny. It's like someone who has no painting experience saying I'm going to become a painter, but that's just what I decided. And I remember watching YouTube videos on swimming technique, because the first triathlon I tried to participate in, I nearly drowned. I'm like swimming at a 45-degree angle in the water, trying not to get run over. And, so I was like, oh, I really don't know what I'm doing. And so, I don't know, that sucked up about 10 years of my life. And I don't really know how relevant that is at the moment, but just crossing over into my 40s, just realizing, like my, I'm much more prone to injury, and my body doesn't work the way it used to. And I crashed my bike in a race last week, and I'm mostly okay. I mean, I dislocated some ribs. Apparently, I finally had to go to the doctor because things weren't working well, and had to still taking up some time off. And so I don't know, in and out of these circles, like athletics, biohacking, Rich Roll. I don't know if you're familiar with his podcast, or a guy named Ben Greenfield. He's insane. He's almost as insane as Bryan Johnson. And now this was happening in my life, this kind of interest in athletics and training and training protocols, and was also coming alongside my interest in just, I guess I would say, men's work in general, starting with Iron John and kind of rekindling the conversation of what does healthy masculinity look like. We kind of were, in certain circles at least, kind of masculinity period had a bad name, and people like Robert Bly and a few others were kind of resurrecting the conversation of what does an initiated male look like. And the traditional masculine energies, I don't necessarily mean male, but masculine energies, maybe they ought not to be tossed by the wayside here, but we need a rejuvenated conversation with them, a mature conversation. How do we relate to these powers and energies and proclivities? And part of that, feeling physically healthy and capable, is just part of it. It's not, we can't separate the world out between the physical and the spiritual, or the physical and the emotional. It's all one long conversation. And but for a while it felt kind of personally kind of a little schizophrenic for me. Like I'd be listening to Eckhart Tolle one day about the power of now and presence, and the next day, I'd be listening to Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL. Okay, so I think I first heard of Bryan Johnson through my wife. She tends to be a little more plugged into cultural things than I am. And I think she asked me if I'd ever heard of him or knew anything about him. And I hadn't. And I listened to a long podcast that he did with Barry Weiss on the Honestly podcast. And I was like, man, this guy is really interesting and very dedicated and very sincere. That's the thing I liked about him the most. And he's experimenting with all kinds of, like I said, technologies and foods, and like, what does an optimum life look like, and how do we lengthen our life, and sort of a soul dedication in this domain. And it even gets into the ridiculous things where he's like, now he has all the data on saunas, and he's realizing it also affects his sperm count. So it's like he's like doing a sauna and also like icing his nuts at the same time. It's like, whoa, what is going on? Kind of along the lines of everything is, what does Marie-Louise von Franz says? Everything is half wrong anyway, and we have to move forward. And maybe it's more like that. And okay, and what really got me going is that I heard recently that Bryan Johnson has an autoimmune disease. And I forget what he called it, some sort of like gastrointestinal autoimmune disorder of some sort. He said in his own words, my stomach is literally eating itself. And that line, like all of a sudden the vent of the underworld opened, and all I heard was the Prometheus myth. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, particularly from Zeus. And his punishment was to be chained to a rock. And every day, an eagle, I think it was an eagle, eats out his liver, the sort of center or seat of the ancient person, you know. That's how the Greeks thought about the liver, almost like the gut, the center, the instinctual domain, the rootedness of our humanness. Every day, the eagle would eat out his liver, and every night it would grow back. This kind of perpetual punishment, because there are consequences. And you say, well, what do we learn from myths? They're not straight ahead. They're not moral lessons. You don't say, well, the lesson of the story is don't steal fire from the gods. Actually, it's like, no, everything has a shadow side. Everything has a consequence. It's especially when you're playing with the big powers here, and the kind of quest for immortality. I mean, that's as old as every ancient story. This is Adam and Eve. This is the serpent saying, well, you'll not surely die if you eat from the knowledge of good and evil. You'll not die. And they go and find out, you know. It's what's the ancient myth that has the parallel flood story in it? I can't think of it right now. Wow, this is drawing a little blank on something that took up so much of my graduate work. Hold on, I'm going to look it up. As soon as I started typing, I remembered the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's the same quest, the quest for immortality. You could even say it's in the Grail stories, the eternal cup here. And there are consequences, there are downstream effects, and I don't know. For me, it was like, I mean, I felt kind of I was in a way grieving for Bryan Johnson, because I like him. I want him to succeed, and he's an experimenter. He's doing it on behalf of the rest of humanity, you could say. Like, I'm going to use my body as a lab rat here, and hopefully the data will help improve the lives of other people. That's pretty noble, but this kind of stealing fire, that's, I guess, what technology is. There are consequences, and I mean, Prometheus has his liver eaten out, and Bryan Johnson's own stomach is eating itself. It's like, man, you can't make that shit up. It's like, it's not causal exactly. That's not the way I see the universe. Like, he did this and it caused this. It's more like a kind of synchronistic and mythic truth here. Nobody gets out of it. We're that vulnerable. There's a great line in the Mishnah, in Jewish literature, with the measure a person uses, so it is measured to him. And Jesus, this is very close to a line from Jesus. I think he says, with the measure you use, it will be measured against you. Same principle. It's like what you put out in the world comes back to you in kind, to a certain extent. It's not like scientific karma, you know, like, or if then. It's more like the principle, like, be careful what you're playing with. And that's the feeling I get from listening to, I'm just not surprised. Like, no part of me was surprised to hear that all of a sudden Bryan Johnson has an autoimmune disorder, and I don't wish that upon him. Definitely not. I hope he figures it out, which is what he says he's going to do. And again, like, what are we supposed to do with myths? Because you can't conclude Prometheus made the wrong choice. All you can say is the choice had consequences. Everything is half wrong anyway, or everything is half right anyway. It's like, well, fire isn't just like ability to cook or something, or keep the wolves away. It's like, it's really a symbol of the life, of the heat of culture itself, art and creativity and technology and the capacity to make and to build and to grow, and fire itself is that transformative element. It's like you look at a piece of wood and you don't see all the heat and power in it until it's on fire. It's like, there it is. There's the transforming fiery work. And so thankfully Prometheus stole fire from the gods, but he also got his liver eaten out every day. Which leads me to some thoughts about Nietzsche. Now, again, I'm trying to understand just a little bit of Nietzschean thought. And, I use the internet. I'll ask AI things about Nietzsche. In fact, I asked AI some things about the Ubermensch, which I'll mention here in a moment, which is, somewhat helpful. I don't know if you use ChatGPT ever or whatever, any of these other platforms, Claude, and they're great pattern detectors, and it's also a bit scary. And that's also out on the frontier of the Promethean possibility. What are we stealing here? And what are the downstream consequences? And are we willing to live with those and face those and that sort of thing? But I want to read you Nietzsche's famous passage about the death of God. I may have read it on this podcast before. I've certainly alluded to it, but it's worth hearing. And from Thus Spake Zarathustra, his kind of, I don't know what you would call that kind of writing. It's almost like a kind of parable or myth, but in a modern, kind of a modern, it's like a genre unto itself. Okay, here's the passage. God is dead. This isn't even Nietzsche speaking. This is a character. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves? The murderers of all murderers. What was the holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe the blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? It is not the greatness of this deed too great for us. Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? What a passage. I don't know what he means, other than humanity has reached a place where the death of God is real for so many. And partly it is science and technology and biochemistry and atomic, knowledge of the atom. And it's psychological sophistication. It's the amassing of knowledge is part of what has led many to dismiss the notion of God. And it's not like, I don't know if this is a theological claim or even an ontological claim perhaps as much as a psychological claim. We live as if God is dead. Most people do, and remains dead, and we had something to do with it. And so part of the question is, now what? And Nietzsche says must we ourselves not become God simply to appear worthy of it? And here, this is like a little wedge into Nietzschean thought. Like, okay, what do we do in the wake of this? And here's where his ideas, I'm not saying I understand them all that well. Probably many of the listeners could help me out with this, but I'm a student. But Nietzsche came up with what he called the Ubermensch, the ultimate human, or the the phase of humanity beyond our present state. He said, we're on the way to this. We're on the way to this. And it's a way of overcoming the self as we know it. And here's where Jung and Nietzsche are kind of talking to each other, where Jung too is also about overcoming, maybe he would say, the ego or the small self, or individuation. And now we might get confused with the use of self. He might say the emergence of the deeper self. But Nietzsche was saying we need to overcome. We need to overcome the present state of humanity and its value system, most importantly. Forget about the afterlife. It's only now. And in the wake of the death of God, we must create new values. That's the Nietzschean idea. We must create new values. And part of me thinks, well, yeah, that sounds kind of right. Like, or interesting, I might say. Yeah, we can't live without values. That's an admission. And there is something to mistrust about inherited wisdom and even inherited values and inherited ethics. And this is where Christians, religious people don't like Nietzsche, because he just rips them apart. He rips apart the Christian ethical framework with a mind that is almost impossible to argue with. So, and then he, in a way says, well, we're moving to the ultimate human here, or something like that. And the path to that has three phases, and this I found absolutely fascinating. He says the phases are the camel, the lion, and the child. I mean, I wish I would have read this back when I was writing my book, Bitten by a Camel. It's like I didn't even know that I was accidentally, unconsciously kind of affirming some of the things that he was saying, because he outlines what these phases look like. Sorry, my mic just cut out for a second. The camel phase is exactly what you might imagine. It's the phase of bearing something, the weight of something. The camel is a beast of burden. And when Nietzsche is playing with this image, he's actually talking about the more noble side. Like, tell me what is true and good and noble, and I will carry it. That's what the camel says. Tell me what is true and good and noble, and I will carry it. And that's the world most of us are born into and raised into. So inherited wisdom, parental wisdom, religious tradition, what makes someone good, moral, righteous, and that has to be earned. Like, the camel has to learn how to carry this. And he says that's the first phase here. And it might even be, I don't know if this is a bit of a stretch, but you hear it a bit in the line of Jesus saying, not my will, but yours. Like, I want to take on this larger, noble path. He says the next phase of humanity, which we're entering, which Nietzsche fully inhabited, which is the phase of the stage of the lion. And the lion says, no, I'm not going to carry this. I'm not going to take this on. There are no more thou shalt not, thou shalt not. But it's more like I will. It's me. I will take responsibility. And so there's like this bucking of religion and tradition and social norms and parental whatever expectations and morality that we've inherited, and all that is to be called into question and to be challenged. And you might say, well, everybody's doing that. And I'd say probably not in the Nietzschean sense, because most people who are rebels are just really conforming to something else. That's an idea I got from Bill Plotkin. The rebel is just a conformist with, more interesting clothes. It's like, Oh, you're the first person to follow fish around and take mushrooms, how free. It's like, no, you just look like everybody else out here. And it's so there's some truth to, like, we're not going to take inherited wisdom, but it doesn't tend to look like the lion like Nietzsche is describing. It's where there's a real, almost attack of, and deep philosophical and existential attack on inherited values. I'm going to challenge all of these in the deepest sense. And in some ways, it's pretty destructive. And like the phrase, God is dead, it's like, that's a fairly destructive phrase, even though Nietzsche turns around and says, there's not enough water in the world to wash the blood from our hands. It's like downstream consequences. Nevertheless, that's really a bold and destructive claim to make. He says, but in the future, on the way to the Ubermensch, beyond our present state of humanity, we'll return to the child, which is kind of shockingly like Jesus. Unless you change and become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And I think, well, at least in part, Nietzsche would agree, even though I don't think he was a big fan of, he's definitely not a fan of Christianity or Christendom. I don't know about Jesus. But the lion must become a child. And I love this kind of threefold possibility. It's like, even in my book, Bitten by a Camel, it's like, what is that about? It was about shedding certain inherited ideas, theologies, and images from my own fundamentalist past and taking those off of the camel. That was my metaphor. Take them off the camel, more raw in a way, but also challenging. It was like, I'm not saying I'm a lion or whatever, but no, I'm not a biblical literalist. I don't read the story that way. No, that doesn't strike me as healthy, and it's not for me. So a little bit of no built in, but if I get stuck there, if it's just a series of no's, then I'm like just a deconstructionist. Just go around saying no all the time. I don't like this. I don't like that. That doesn't work. That's bad. That's patriarchal. That's, power hungry. That's manipulative. That's, and offered, excuse me, nothing in return, which is why Nietzsche at least is pointing toward the answer being found in the innocence of the child, of a new beginning, a forgetting, what he calls a sacred yes, even. Now, a yes to what? That's where I kind of have to say, I don't know. I don't know what he meant, but I can feel the truth of the sequence here. Okay, so what the hell does this have to do with the Ubermensch and with Bryan Johnson and this wave of technologically infused biohacking extension of life obsession we have right now? You could even tie in the desire to go to Mars, to colonize space. We're going to live forever, whatever that Oasis song is. What a great song, by the way. What a funny band. I love that they were singing that at the World Cup, an Oasis song. It's so cool. Okay, yeah, so what does this have to do with the kind of cultural state we're in right now? And here's where I'm going to make some tentative suggestions, and I'm inviting you to hold them somewhat loosely because, like I said at the beginning, I'm kind of going out on the edge of my own kind of understanding here. In a loose sense, this quest, this tech bro quest, is, I think, or kind of almost this engineering project is an expression, but in a loose way, of what Nietzsche meant by the Ubermensch. Let's move beyond our present state of humanity. But I want to be clear about something, because what Nietzsche was talking about had much more to do with philosophy, existential philosophy, than physically engineering a different body. That definitely, those are not the same thing, but I just see some overlaps. That's what I'm saying. I'm going to overcome the self through optimization of everything. I'm going to overcome my own limits. And it's the I that's in charge. And even extending life, this has always kind of puzzled me, like the one who wants to live forever, like what part of us wants to live forever? Is it the ego? And would we want someone's ego to live forever? Would we want Bryan Johnson's ego to live forever? Or, what's that called? Like, cryonics or something, where they freeze the body. There's that famous baseball player that had his body frozen, and the idea until a future date when technology is, whatever, reached the place where we can bring the dead back, then he'll be back. And I don't know what he'll be doing, playing baseball again, or there were rumors that Walt Disney did the same thing. I don't think that I think they were just rumors, but maybe not. I don't know. But like, well, who comes back? Is it the ego? Like what would die and what would come back? And what's the relationship between, ego? I mean, ego as like our conscious sense of selves, the seat of our conscious self, which is one tiny little island on a vast ocean of unconscious material. And so is that what comes back? If Walt Disney comes back, what would he be like? Like, what if he watched a Disney movie and he's like, this is complete crap. What is this? Would that change in some way? Would we recognize the person as being the same? Anyway, I don't know why I'm like down that little rabbit hole, but it's this engineering project. I'm going to live forever. It seems like very much it's rooted in the ego, the small self. That thing needs to go on. And if that thing goes on, it's like sort of downloading. What if you could download your ego into the internet, and like my kids can have conversations with my artificial ego in some sort of online space. It's like, well, who the hell would want to do that? It's like, we barely know who we are. That's just, the way I see it. And of course I see a parallel between, transcending the self, self-transcendence, going beyond the self, Nietzschean idea, and what Bryan Johnson is up to and what he represents, what this kind of field represents. And in some ways it is like a will to power. It's like, but it's kind of a funny way of the ego's will to power to express itself, because it's totally dependent on technological input and data. Like, I get this data back and then I do something with it. So it's like you become addicted in a way to the system. It's like, I mentioned I crashed my bike last week, and so I haven't been exercising. But my watch is telling me that I'm getting great sleep and I'm at peak fitness. It's like, well, what the hell does the watch know? I can barely breathe. So addicted to a kind of data system. And whose will is in charge here? Am I in charge of my own life? I memorized the poem Invictus in the 9th grade. I'm the captain of my fate and the master of my soul. And it took me 30 years to realize that's false. I don't know if that's really how it works. I don't think I'm the captain of my fate or the master of my soul. It's like I might feel and act that way, and then what happens every afternoon? My liver's eaten out by forces and powers beyond and outside of my ego's will to power, or my ego's desires, or my ego's fantasies. And okay, one other critique, and I'm not trying to be hard on on Bryan Johnson. Like I said, there's something I really like about him. And but like this mantra, don't die, it's like, it makes me uncomfortable. It's like, well, first of all, there's a kind of an avoidance built in, and avoid something. That doesn't sound like much of a life, to live life to the fullest. It's like, I just want to avoid the inevitable. And we all know, we know what's going to happen. We know how the story ends, but part of us says, well, but maybe not, and there's so much truth to changing diet, lifestyle, vitamins, whatever, can extend the quality of life, even the length of life. I don't think it would be silly to deny that. So it's not like he's on a fool's errand here, but this don't die. And this is where I think there's at least a conversation between this world and Nietzsche, because it automatically reveals what's at the top of the value hierarchy. And in this case, it's avoiding death. That the ultimate at the top of the pyramid is avoiding death. Now that is recreating a value system, exactly like Nietzsche, what Nietzsche said. He's like, we don't need God for this, we don't need inherited wisdom. We got, the times they are changing, and let's through our own philosophical prowess and ethical freedom earned through logic and reason, let's decide for ourselves what's at the top of the hierarchy. It's kind of like when, what's his name? Sam Harris, atheist, has extremely strong moral arguments about what's right and wrong. Like, what happened in Gaza, is it a genocide? Is it not? And what he calls Hamas a death cult that doesn't value life. He's got a lot of interesting things to say, but none of that is based on any kind of value system outside of Sam Harris's logic. At least that he might disagree with what I'm saying, but that's my sense for him. No, I came to this rational conclusion. This is the rational conclusion, and this is the morality that we can choose in the wake of the death of God. Like, we can't consult the ancient books to find out life is valuable. We don't need any of that. We can figure that out on our own, and again, it reveals the source of the value maker, like Bryan Johnson. Well, I just decided that the most important thing is to not die. And that's where, personally, I part ways. I don't think deep-seated values are just up to the ego's capacity to figure them out, to think well, to use logic. And I'm not against, obviously, logic and rationality or something, but I think the deepest values are transcendent. That makes me a religious person, I suppose. The deepest truths are archetypal. They're patterns of truth that we bump into. And the deepest patterns we don't shape. We don't have a say in. We're actually, in a way, subjected to them. Subjected to truths that are beyond our small, egoic will. Something along those lines. So maybe the place to land the plane is just to ask some questions rather than me sort of riff on my opinions here. I'd like to know if this movement that Bryan Johnson is a part of is trying to steal longevity through the natural sciences and through technology and data. Is it like that? Is it similar to that? And if so, what are the consequences? What gets eaten out? Maybe you could even wonder something like, I was just thinking about the liver being something like the soul, What does it look like to nourish the soul, to optimize the soul? It's kind of an odd question. To optimize a soul-oriented, meaning-oriented life. I'm not saying ignore the body. I'm not saying ignore, your Garmin or whatever, the Whoop, the data collector, telling you have poor sleep. Then you can't sleep because you have poor sleep. At what cost? At what cost? What if you gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? That's the line from Jesus. What if you gain the whole world? What if you live till 133, but you're such a miserable, self-obsessed, egocentric prick that no one wants to be around you? By the way, I'm not calling Bryan Johnson that at all. In fact, I kind of find him a little charming in a way. Innocent and charming. Maybe he's more like Parsifal. He's kind of innocently going about this. That's kind of the way I see him. But I think these are the mythic questions. And are there limits? That's the Promethean question. Are there limits to what we can steal? And what happens to us if we turn all of our attention to taking what isn't ultimately ours, and as if we can take our mortality back? I doubt it. That's the opening chapter of Genesis. We are now east of Eden, and that's the way it is. Doesn't everything die at last and too soon, says Mary Oliver. And it's not simply a matter of, well, just accept that and, never go to the doctor. No. There's just a ongoing dance with the grim reaper that is actually part of living a deeply full human life. But it's like a dance. I said I was going to end with questions, and I'm already kind of spinning up and out of them. But that's the question I want to ask here is, are we stealing something from the gods? And the second question is something like this. How do you think values work? Do you and I invent them? If we reject Christianity, traditional spirituality, religious frames, can we live without values, ethics, morality, without a hierarchy? I don't think so, because what I'm saying is that Don't Die reveals a hierarchy of values. So now, are we the ones who get to decide what that looks like? That's I think, the question for the 21st century. I'm going to decide through my lens, my economic, social, materialistic lens, what's at the top of the value hierarchy. And I don't have to apologize for it. It's a relativistic world, This is what I think is most valuable, and, to hell with everything else. That doesn't strike me as quite right. That's, are we the inventors of values? And if there are deeper, more transcendent values, how do we bump into them? And I guess that's why this podcast is called Hints and Guesses. And the rest is prayer, to finish the T.S. Eliot line. It's hints and guesses. We get hints and guesses, my view, of the transcendent, deeper, divine, and sacred values, not just from our own. We get hints and guesses and myths and stories and legends and that kind of thing, through inherited wisdom, and not just through the worship of our own mind and our capacity to steal fire. So that's another sort of line of question that, for me, arises up out of this. And I think that's about as far as I want to go today. Just wanted to put out a podcast, and I'm working on another one about the Parsifal story. I've been writing actually quite a bit about the Parsifal myth, and I'm ready to share some things on the podcast. And so you can look forward to that here down the road. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. I do have a couple of announcements. My next big program for Animus is the year-long. And the year-long Soulcraft Immersion, it's called. And I think it's the best program that Animus Valley Institute offers. And not because it's Well, primarily because of its longevity. It's like, well, sometimes when we find ourselves at these really liminal, transitional places, it's nice to be held inside a certain container for a while, and that's what the year-long is for. And all the details are on the Animas Valley Institute website. You can read, is this the kind of thing that I might be called toward? Because we're taking applications now, and it's likely to fill up in the next month or so. And that's really the only thing I wanted to sort of promote here. And I was a participant in the year-long many years ago now, changed my life. And this, in some sense, that's partly why I wanted to go down the path of guiding and coming alongside people in this way, was because of my experience in the year-long. So it really opened up a few pathways for me and shaped my life in really important and kind of mysterious ways. So check it out, Animas Valley Institute website, animas.org. That's it for now. Thanks so much for supporting this podcast, especially to my patrons, making it happen each month. Really, really grateful. Free to listen to, but not free to make. So your contributions each month make a big difference. So wishing everybody wild blessings and hints and guesses. Peace.